The great ship Valaris drifted through deep space, glowing like a silver beast against the black sky inside its halls. Thousands of alien soldiers laughed, shouted, and filled the dining bay with noise. The scent of burning plasma and cooked meat mixed in the air. It was the night of celebration after another victory against the human resistance. At the far end of the hall stood Elias, a quiet human cook, his gray apron stained. His eyes tired, he moved with calm, serving tray after tray to the loud alien cadets. They barely noticed him. To them, humans were nothing more than tools, servants who obeyed without a word. Sitting in the center of the room was Rethan, a young alien cadet with green scales and sharp yellow eyes. Known for his arrogance, he slammed his mug on the table and laughed. "This is what the mighty humans are good for," he shouted. "Cooking for their masters," the other aliens laughed, banging their fists. Some even threw scraps of food on the floor. Elias didn't respond. He placed another bowl of steaming stew on Rathan's table. The smell of spices filled the air. It wasn't alien food, it was simple. Human-made stew, vegetables, herbs, a bit of protein, cooked with old-fashioned care. Rethan stared at the bowl and sneered. "What is this filth?" he said loudly. "Human food? Are we animals now?" Elias looked at him, his voice calm. "It's food, cadet. It will fill your hunger." The hall went quiet for a second, then erupted in laughter again. Rethan leaned forward, his fangs showing. "You call this food? This looks like waste," he hissed. He lifted the bowl, stared at it with disgust, and then spat into it. The sound echoed through the hall. Thick and wet, he grinned and said, "There, now it tastes better." The aliens around him howled with laughter. Elias didn't flinch, he stood still, eyes focused on Rethan, the human's face calm, unreadable. Behind him, the fire of the cooking units reflected in his eyes. "You shouldn't waste what you don't understand," Elias said quietly, his voice so soft yet cutting through the laughter. Rethan tilted his head, amused. "And what will you do, little cook? Hit me with a spoon?" Elias turned slowly, his movement steady. He wiped his hands on his apron and said, "No, cadet." His tone calm, too calm. "I'll serve you the main course soon." The laughter stopped. For a heartbeat, the hall felt colder. Even the lights flickered. A few soldiers glanced around. Uncomfortable, Rethan smirked. "Oh? And what's the main course, human?" Elias looked over his shoulder, his voice low but clear. "Something that bites back." Then he walked back to the kitchen, the heavy doors closing behind him with a hiss. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with nervous whispers. Rethan tried to laugh again, but it sounded forced. "He's just a cook," he muttered. "A slave." But even he could feel something strange in the air, a tension that wouldn't fade. Inside the kitchen, the lights flickered red and white, the air thick with steam. Elias moved among the metal counters, his face expressionless, his hands working with silent rhythm. The smell of spice and oil filled the small room. The old human recipes that once fed armies now stirred under his touch. He opened a sealed locker marked for officers only. Inside were containers of alien ingredients, precious, dangerous, forbidden. He took one, pouring its silver contents into a pot. The mixture hissed and glowed faint blue. He whispered to himself, "You mock our food, but you'll learn to taste the truth." His hands steady as he stirred, his eyes reflecting the soft blue light. Behind him, shadows moved and other human workers, silent, watching, their eyes tired but alive. One whispered, "Elias, what are you doing?" He answered, "Teaching them respect." Hours passed. The laughter outside faded as the night deepened. One by one, the aliens left for their quarters. Only a few guards remained in the hall. Rethan among them, still drinking, still proud. Then a faint smell reached them, thick, warm, intoxicating. It was unlike anything they had ever smelled before, something primal, something that made their mouths water. Rethan lifted his head. "What is that?" he said, sniffing the air. Elias stepped out of the kitchen, holding a large covered tray, steam rising from it, his steps slow and sure. "I told you I'd serve the main course," he said softly. Placing the tray before Rethan, the alien cadet grinned, trying to act fearless. "Well, open it, human." Elias smiled slightly, the corners of his mouth barely moving. "You first," he said. Rethan laughed and grabbed the cover, lifting it quickly. Steam burst out, and the smell hit everyone in the room. Rich, heavy, perfect. Inside the tray, the meat was dark red, roasted perfectly, carved clean. The sight of it made the aliens lean closer. Drooling, Rethan stared at it, confused. "What meat is this?" Elias looked into his eyes, calm and unblinking. The kind you'll never mock again. Something in his voice made every soldier freeze, their laughter gone. Rethan swallowed, the back of his neck cold. You, he started. But Elias turned and walked back into the kitchen without another word. The door closed and silence filled the room. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Rethan looked down at the meat again. Suddenly uneasy, from the kitchen a low hum began. Machines starting up. Vents closing, knives clinking on metal. And somewhere behind those doors, the human's voice echoed quietly through the vents. Dinner has just begun. The aliens stared at each other, unsure whether to laugh or run, but deep inside, even Rethan knew something had changed that night. Something had begun that none of them could stop. The next morning, the dining hall of the Valaris was silent. The tables that were once filled with laughter now stood empty. The smell of last night's strange meal still hung in the air, thick and heavy. No one spoke about it, but every alien who had tasted it couldn't forget. It was too good, too real, too perfect. Rethan sat alone at the long metal table, his golden eyes hollow, his mind replaying the moment when Elias spoke those words. The kind you'll never mock again. He hadn't slept. Something about the human's voice kept echoing in his head like a whisper under his skin. The kitchen doors were closed now, sealed tight. No noise came from inside. Even the guards avoided walking near it. Some said they heard faint sounds, humming, chopping, the hiss of steam, and sometimes laughter that didn't sound human. When the shift bell rang, the crew began arriving, trying to act normal, but their eyes betrayed unease. One soldier muttered, "I swear, I saw a shadow moving behind that glass," another whispered. "They say Elias never left the kitchen last night." Rethan slammed his cup down. "He's just a cook," he said sharply, but his voice cracked. No one believed it anymore. Not even him. Finally, the heavy doors slid open with a low hiss. Steam poured out like fog. Elias walked out calmly, his apron clean, his expression peaceful. "Breakfast is ready," he said quietly, his tone polite, almost gentle. The aliens looked at each other nervously. Rethan forced a smirk. "Oh, so the slave dares serve again?" he said loudly, trying to sound brave. Elias didn't respond. He just nodded and stepped aside, motioning toward the counter. The smell hit them first, and warm, rich, mouth-watering, a mix of roasted spice and sweetness, something their advanced chefs could never match. One by one, the soldiers stepped forward, drawn by the scent despite their fear, despite their pride. Bowls of thick stew and roasted meat waited on the counter, each one steaming, glowing slightly under the lights. Rethan frowned. "What is this?" Elias smiled faintly. "A new recipe made from what I found in the storage." A few aliens hesitated, but the smell was too much to resist. They took the bowls and began to eat. At first silence, then sighs, then quiet groans of pleasure. The food melted on their tongues, full of flavor, heat, and something deeper, it felt. Alive. One alien started. "This is amazing." Another nodded. "Better than anything the fleet chefs ever made." Elias stood behind the counter, hands folded, watching quietly, his eyes calm but cold. Rethan, trying to hide his curiosity, finally took a spoonful. The taste hit him like lightning. Powerful, addictive, unlike anything he had ever eaten. For a brief moment he forgot his pride, his rank, everything. When the bowls were empty, silence fell again, heavy and strange. Everyone looked at Elias. Rethan cleared his throat. "What is this meat?" Elias's smile widened just a little. "You'll find it familiar." The room went still. Someone dropped a spoon. It clattered against the floor, echoing too loudly. "What do you mean?" one alien whispered. Elias looked at them, his voice flat and cold now. "Last night, one of your cadets didn't return to his quarters." Rethan froze, his throat dry. "What are you saying?" Elias wiped his hands slowly with a towel, his eyes never leaving Rethan's. "I told you I'd serve the main course." For a second, no one moved, no one breathed. The sound of the ship's hum grew louder in their ears. Rethan jumped from his seat, grabbing his blaster. "You're lying!" he shouted, but his voice shook. Elias tilted his head, his calm never breaking. "Am I?" He pressed a button on the counter and a small hologram appeared above the table. Footage from the security camera. It showed the night before, the kitchen dimly lit. Elias dragging something large across the floor, wrapped in a sheet. The recording ended before anything else could be seen. The aliens stepped back, horrified. Some dropped their bowls. Elias turned away, cleaning his counter again, his tone quiet. Don't waste food, it's rude. Rethan's heart pounded. He aimed his weapon. You monster. Elias looked back over his shoulder. Monster, he said softly. You spit in our food, called us animals, treated us like dirt. Tell me, cadet, which one of us looks like a monster now? The alien soldiers backed away slowly, some trembling. Rethan's finger tightened on the trigger. But something in Elias's eyes stopped him. Not anger, not fear, but pity. Elias stepped closer, his voice low. The galaxy thinks humans are weak, but we've learned to survive. We learned to taste cruelty and feed it back. He leaned closer, his whisper sharp. And you, Rethan, you were the lesson. Rethan dropped his weapon. Stumbling back, his body shaking, he couldn't breathe. The smell of the meal that had once been so delicious now made him sick. Elias walked past him, heading back into the kitchen, his words trailing behind like smoke. Dinner will be ready at sunset. You're welcome to join. If you dare. The doors closed again, the hall left in silence. Rethan fell to his knees, his mind spinning, the other aliens whispering in terror. From behind the sealed doors, they heard faint sounds again, the clink of knives, the bubbling of pots, and a single human voice humming an old Earth melody. And for the first time in their proud alien lives, they were afraid of a man who cooked. The ship Volaris hung in the quiet of space, its silver hull reflecting the cold light of distant stars. But inside, silence had turned into fear. Whispers moved through every corridor, the story of the human cook spreading faster than fire. Some laughed nervously, saying it was a rumor. Others swore they had seen the footage themselves. Elias dragging something heavy into the kitchen. Rethan sat in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His scales pale, his eyes sunken. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bowl, the meat, the human's calm voice saying, "You'll find it familiar." It wasn't just fear eating him from the inside. It was shame. He had mocked a man who never lost his composure, and now he couldn't stop trembling. The door beeped, an officer entered. "Cadet Rethan," she said sharply, "Commander Vrax demands your report." Rethan stood slowly, his voice hollow. "About the human?" She nodded, her jaw tight. "He hasn't reported for labor since last night, and the security team that went to question him hasn't returned either." Rethan felt the cold settle in his stomach. "You think he's dangerous?" She stared at him. "He's human, that's already dangerous." They walked through the dim hallways, soldiers standing in groups, whispering as they passed. The air felt thick, heavy, unnatural. When they reached the kitchen bay, the door was half open, the smell of cooked food still strong. Commander Vrax stood inside, huge and armored, his red eyes glowing under the dim lights. He turned as they entered. "Finally," he growled. "Our little cook is playing games," Rethan swallowed. "Where is he?" Vrax's voice was like metal. "Gone, the kitchen's empty, the food's untouched. And the surveillance system stopped working at dawn." He stepped closer to Rethan, his voice low. "You were the last to speak to him." Rethan nodded, barely breathing. "He said dinner would be ready at sunset." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll be ready before him." He turned to the guards. "Seal the lower decks, search every vent, every storage bay. And if you see him—" He smiled cruelly. "Don't bother taking him alive." The soldiers moved fast, boots pounding the floors, weapons ready, but Rethan stayed behind. Staring at the empty counter there on the metal surface lay something new, a folded piece of cloth stained with something dark. He picked it up slowly and his chest tightened. It was a military patch, human origin, the insignia of the old Earth Army. The letters faded but still readable. Unity through strength. His hands shook. He looked around the kitchen again, really looked this time, and saw the marks on the floor. Small lines scratched into the metal, symbols written in English. He leaned closer, reading them out loud. "We were slaves. Now we serve justice." His pulse raced. He turned to call the commander, but stopped. A small light flickered under one of the shelves. He bent down and found a small data pad wedged between the pipes. Its surface cracked but still glowing. He pressed it and a recording began. Elias's voice filled the room. "Calm, slow, steady. If you're listening, it means the feast has begun. You called us servants, but we were soldiers once, trained to build, to fight, to endure. When your empire broke our world, you didn't kill us. You made us cooks, cleaners, slaves, and thought we'd forget who we are. But humans don't forget, we adapt, we wait." The voice paused, then continued, colder now. "You fed on our pride, So we learned to feed on yours, each insult, each order. Every bowl you threw away on when it all added to the recipe. Tonight the meal is served not for hunger, but for history. Rethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The recording ended with one last whisper. Bon appétit. He dropped the pad, the metal clanging loudly, echoing through the hall. Commander Vrax turned sharply. What was that? Rathan's voice shook. He planned this. All of it. Suddenly the lights went out, plunging the ship into darkness. Alarms blared, red warning lights flashing through the halls. Security breach in lower decks. A voice shouted over the comms. Containment failing. Vrax growled. Find him. But his order was drowned by the sudden explosion that rocked the ship. The floor shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Rathan stumbled, holding onto the wall. The smell of smoke filling his lungs through the chaos. He heard it. Faint music echoing from the ventilation system. A soft earth melody. Old, haunting, peaceful. He looked up, whispering, He's everywhere, down below in the maintenance tunnels. Elias moved like a shadow, calm and precise, his eyes glowing faint in the red emergency lights. He opened a small case and pulled out an old Earth sniper's insignia. Worn and bent, he placed it on his chest, whispering, For the fallen. He looked through the grate above him, watching aliens run in panic, shouting orders. They thought we were cooks, he said softly. But every meal teaches patience. Every flame teaches control. He lifted a small detonator, his voice calm. And tonight they'll taste the truth up above. Rathan and the others heard the voice echoing through every speaker. Dinner is served. A series of silent flashes followed, one after another. The ship trembling as hidden charges went off in perfect rhythm. The lights flickered again, smoke and sparks filling the air. Rathan grabbed the rail, staring at the chaos around him. He's not just a cook, he whispered. Commander Vrax snarled. Then what is he? Rathan looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. He's a soldier. And somewhere deep in the ship, Elias smiled quietly, his voice calm. Humanity never stopped fighting. We just learned to wait for the perfect time to serve. The ship Valeris burned in silence, flames gliding along its hull like orange ribbons in the endless dark. Inside, panic echoed through every corridor. Alarms screamed, red lights flashed, smoke filled the air, and the proud alien soldiers, once masters, ran like prey through their own warship. Commander Vrax shouted orders, his voice rough and furious. Seal the maintenance decks. Find the human. But his commands were drowned by chaos. Humans who had been silent slaves for years now moved with purpose, no longer afraid, their eyes bright with something long lost, hope. Elias led them through the lower corridors, his movements calm, his mind sharp. He knew every corner, every weak point in the ship. Years of working in the kitchens had taught him more than any spy could learn. Cut power to Deck 7, he ordered, his voice steady. They'll lose access to the command bridge, one of the younger humans. A girl named Kara looked at him with wide eyes. Sir, what if they kill us? Elias turned to her, his expression unreadable. They already did long ago, he said softly. Now we live by reminding them of what we were, above them. Rethan and his unit stumbled through smoke, searching, the air thick with heat. He's turning the humans against us, one shouted. Rethan's voice shook. No, he's turning them into themselves. Down below, Elias reached the old food storage area, where hundreds of humans hid, shaking, unsure. When they saw him, they fell silent. His presence alone seemed to carry command. Listen to me, he said, standing on a crate, his voice echoing through the room. For years they fed us scraps, called us weak, made us bow. He paused, letting the silence stretch. But we are not weak, we're patient, and patience is the sharpest weapon. He looked at each face, seeing fear, anger, hunger. Tonight, we take back what they stole. Our name, our dignity, our humanity. The crowd stirred, whispers of courage rising like sparks. Kara stepped forward, trembling. You said we don't fight to kill? Elias nodded. No, he said. We fight to be remembered. Above, the command deck erupted in shouts. Vrax slammed his fists on the control board. Shut down the kitchen network, he roared. But one of his tech officers stammered. Sir, it's too late. The humans have control. The power grid is theirs. Screens flickered across the ship, and Elias's face appeared on every monitor. Calm, expressionless, his apron still marked by the faint stain of yesterday's feast. Commander Vrax. His voice echoed through every speaker. You once said humans were food for your empire. Maybe you were right, because we've fed you our silence long enough, and now you're choking on it. The commander bared his teeth. You think you can win, human? You're cooks and cleaners, not warriors. Elias smiled faintly through the broadcast. A cook knows timing. A cleaner knows every weakness, and a slave learns how to survive. Then the screens went dark, and the lights on the ship began to flicker again. One by one, systems failed, the engines stuttered, the weapon bays sealed shut. From the lower decks, humans began to rise. Armed with stolen blasters, pipes, and courage, the rebellion had begun. Rethan watched in disbelief as humans overpowered guard stations, disabling cameras, and seizing control points. He whispered to himself. They were never slaves, they were waiting. He moved through the smoke, searching for Elias, the ship trembling with every explosion. Finally, he reached the observation deck. There he found Elias standing before the large glass wall, looking out at the burning stars. His back turned. You could have left, Rethan said, his voice hoarse. You could have run. Elias didn't turn. Run where? There's nowhere left for us, only forward. Rethan stepped closer, weapon raised but shaking. Why are you doing this? Elias looked over his shoulder, his eyes calm. Because no one remembers who taught your kind to fight. He walked slowly toward Rethan, unarmed. Do you even know how many humans died building this ship? How many bones in these walls? Rethan hesitated, lowering his weapon slightly. We didn't know. Elias's voice hardened. You didn't care. Before Rethan could speak, the sound of heavy footsteps filled the corridor. Commander Vrax appeared with his guards. Enough! He roared. Elias turned, his eyes glowing faint in the red light. You finally came to dinner, Vrax snarled. You've doomed yourself. Elias smiled. Maybe, but I freed everyone else. He pressed a small device in his hand. The floor beneath them shook violently. Rethan stumbled as the windows cracked, revealing the glow of fire outside. Through the chaos, Elias's voice stayed calm. Every kitchen has a fire alarm, Commander. This one just burns brighter. The explosion tore through the upper decks, lights died, and the screams of alarms filled the ship. Humans flooded the halls, pushing forward, not as slaves, but as soldiers reclaiming breath. Kara appeared behind Elias, holding a rifle, her face smudged with ash. The humans have the escape pods, she said. We're winning. Elias nodded slowly. Then make sure you live, that's the real victory. He turned back toward the window, watching Vrax crawl from the debris. The commander's armor cracked, his eyes full of fury. You can't kill an empire, Vrax hissed. Elias stepped closer, his voice quiet but sharp as glass. No, but you can starve it. He pressed another button on his wrist, and the ship's engines screamed one last time before shutting down completely, drifting powerless through the stars. Rethan looked around at the flames. The humans climbing from below, his chest tight, he whispered, He's not a soldier. He's something more. And as Elias walked into the smoke, his calm silhouette fading, the rebellion behind him burning brighter than the fires. Every alien aboard the Valaris finally understood the truth they had ignored for centuries. Humans didn't need power to rise. They only needed hunger. The Valaris drifted like a dying beast through the void, its once bright engines now cold, its halls filled with smoke and silence. Fragments of fire floated past the glass like lost stars. Below deck, hundreds of humans moved through the corridors quietly, carrying the wounded, sharing water, whispering names of those who didn't make it. The rebellion had burned bright, and now the ashes began to settle. Elias walked slowly through the ruined galley, the place where it all began. Broken dishes and melted steel covered the floor, the smell of smoke mixed with herbs, faint traces of the last meal he had served. He placed his hand on a counter blackened by fire, his voice barely above a whisper. Every flame leaves something behind. Kara entered behind him, her face tired but alive. We've taken the command deck, she said softly. Most of the crew surrendered, Rethan included. Elias nodded without turning. Good, he said. He'll have to live with the taste of what he's seen. Kara frowned. What about you, sir? We can escape. The pods are ready. Elias smiled faintly. Someone has to turn off the stove. She stepped forward, shaking her head. You can't stay, you'll die when this ship goes. He looked at her, eyes calm. Maybe that's the right recipe. Up on the command deck, Rethan stood among his wounded comrades, staring at the black screen that once showed endless data streams, now blank. Behind him, humans guarded the exits. None spoke to him. None needed to. Shame already did its work, he whispered. How did it come to this? The door opened. Elias stepped in, his steps slow but sure. Rethan turned, guilt and awe mixing in his voice. You should have killed me. Elias shook his head. Death ends the lesson too soon. He walked past him, looking at the main console, its buttons glowing faintly. Do you know what this is? He asked. Rethan swallowed. Engine control. Elias nodded. A heart valve, if you close it wrong, everything burns. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of damaged machinery was the only sound. Rethan broke the silence. I saw your recording, the one in the kitchen. Elias smiled faintly. Then you understand. Rethan's voice trembled. You didn't just fight for humans, did you? Elias looked at him. No, he said. I fought for what they forgot. That the weak are only weak until they remember they can stand. He tapped the console, setting a slow countdown. The ship's voice crackled. Core overload in 5 minutes. Kara's voice came through the comm, panic rising. Elias, what are you doing? He pressed the transmitter. Ending the feast. Child, make sure everyone's off this ship before it's over. Humans began rushing to the escape pods. Rethan stood frozen, watching him. You're going to destroy the Valaris? Elias nodded. The galaxy must see the smoke. They'll know something changed. He turned away, walking toward the viewport, the stars stretching endless beyond, the reflection of flame dancing on his face. Rethan took a step closer. You could come with us. Tell them yourself. Elias smiled. Legends speak louder than men. The ship trembled again, lights flickering, the countdown echoing through the deck. 3 minutes to core collapse. Elias picked up a single metal pan from the floor, placing it upright on the counter, its surface cracked, but still reflective. Strange, he murmured. I spent years serving food to those who never tasted truth. Rethan stared at him. Why spare me? Elias looked at him one last time. Because someone has to tell them the flavor of fear. The alarms wailed louder. Kara's voice shouted again through the static. We're clear, everyone's out. Elias exhaled slowly. Good, he whispered. Now it's ready. He pressed the final key, locking the sequence. The ship's lights turned white, pure and blinding. He closed his eyes and said softly, For Earth. For every hand that ever cooked, cleaned, and waited. Outside, the escape pods shot into the void, tiny sparks leaving trails of fire behind them. Humans and a few silent aliens watched as the Valaris glowed brighter. Then in one silent heartbeat it exploded, a wave of light sweeping across the stars. From one of the pods, Kara covered her mouth, tears running down her cheeks. Rethan sat beside her, unable to speak. She whispered, He didn't die, did he? Rethan looked at the fading light. No, he said quietly. He became the story. Weeks later, across the galaxy, the legend spread, a story whispered in mess halls, slave quarters, and alien academies. The tale of the human cook who turned humiliation into rebellion, who served justice on a silver plate and changed the taste of power forever. In the years that followed, more humans rose, more empires fell, and wherever rebellion began, someone would draw a small symbol, a simple pan and a flame, the mark of Elias. And in alien kitchens, when a soldier mocked a human, someone would whisper softly, Be careful, you might be the main course. The galaxy had changed, not because of weapons or armies, but because one quiet man had shown that a recipe, when made with patience and fire, could feed freedom itself. And as the new dawn spread across the stars, every voice that remembered him whispered the same word, the one that started it all, unbelievable.